I will never forget the day everything changed. I thought it was just another moment, but I had no idea how much my life would be turned upside down by what was about to happen. I never imagined that something so complicated would happen in my life. It all started innocently, almost banally. As often happens, my husband's nephew, a young man in his 30s, was spending a few days at our house. He had recently returned from a long trip abroad, and my husband was enthusiastically recounting his adventures, with that light in his eyes that only happy memories can ignite. The nephew listened smiling, with that charming and confident air that he had always had, but which now seemed amplified by time and the experiences he had lived. We hadn't seen him for years, and, if I'm honest, I had never thought of him differently from my husband's nephew, at least until then. If you want to know how this story will evolve and what will happen after that moment, subscribe to the channel. That morning, while my husband was busy with his garden projects, I found myself alone with him in the house. A different silence surrounded us, one of those that seemed to speak 1,000 words. We were chatting about his life experience, the world he had seen and the people he had met, when suddenly I sensed something in the air. It was like an invisible thread, slowly stretching between us. It wasn't just his deep, reassuring voice, or the charm of his stories. It was a look, a new way of looking at me. It was intense, profound, as if he was seeing something in me that I had never discovered myself. His every word seemed filled with a deeper meaning, and his every smile was an invitation that I didn't dare interpret. My heart began to beat faster, in a rhythm that I tried to ignore, but it was impossible. The more I tried to push away that feeling, the more it became evident that something was changing. The tension grew subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet every fiber of my body felt it. Every movement, every look, every small gesture that until a moment ago would have seemed harmless was now filled with an irresistible force. I had to do something, get away, break that bubble that seemed to lock us in a parallel world where time and logic no longer mattered. "I have to go take a shower," I said suddenly, in a tone too hasty to sound natural. I hoped that the hot water could bring me back to reality, free me from those thoughts that tormented me. He nodded with a faint smile, one of those that seem to contain a secret that doesn't want to be revealed. Going up the stairs, I still felt his gaze on me, almost physical, as if he was following me at every step. Each step seemed to take me further away from the real world and closer to an invisible boundary. I closed the bathroom door behind me and leaned against the wall for a moment, trying to catch my breath. My breathing was ragged, my heart still pounding. I undressed slowly, letting the hot water flow over my skin, hoping that it could wash away the tension that surrounded me. But it didn't help. Every drop of water seemed to bring me back to him, to his confident smile, to the depth of his eyes, to that way of looking at me that had taken away all certainty from me. Even the sound of the water seemed to repeat his words, the tone of his voice still imprinted in my mind. Then suddenly, a light noise behind me made me jump. I whirled around, my heart speeding up like a crazy drum. The door was closed, yet the sound of light footsteps beyond the wood was unmistakable. I remained still, listening. Every second felt like an eternity. My breath almost held. Then a voice, calm but full of something I couldn't decipher, broke the silence. "Everything okay?" It was him. For a moment, I didn't know what to answer. Yeah, everything's fine," I said finally, trying to keep my voice steady, even though the opposite was happening inside me. His closeness, even if only through that thin barrier, made me feel a whirlwind of emotions that I couldn't control. Every word felt like a thin bridge between the world of reason and something forbidden that I didn't want to explore. "I thought I'd ask if you needed anything," he continued, in a tone that had an indefinable edge. He seemed courteous, almost naive, but beneath that veneer there was something more, a hidden note that vibrated in the air like a tight string. Every pause between words seemed filled with unspoken possibilities. "I'm fine, thanks," I replied quickly, hoping to end this conversation, but every word felt hollow, and while he remained silent, I couldn't ignore the way his interest seemed to go beyond simple politeness. When I came out of the bathroom, with my hair still damp and my bathrobe tight around my body, I felt that something had changed forever. The tension only grew, like a silent storm. Every gesture, every word, every glance exchanged carried with it a new weight. I felt trapped between what I needed to do and what my heart began to desire. There were no more certainties, just a bittersweet chaos that wrapped me like an invisible net. It was an attraction that grew like a silent but powerful current, capable of overwhelming everything in its path. And I, without wanting to admit it, was already giving in. Every day that fine line between what is right and what is inevitable became blurrier, and I felt like I would soon lose all control. Maybe, deep down, I wanted it. Have you ever experienced an unexpected attraction that left you breathless? Write in the comments. Neither of us wanted to admit that we had started anything, but then the day came when things got completely out of hand. It was a quiet afternoon, one of those that seem suspended between the noise of everyday life and the silence that holds unexpressed secrets. My husband was away on business, and I, alone at home with his nephew, felt that invisible tension tighten like a knot in my stomach. I decided to take advantage of the quiet to carve out a moment just for myself. I wanted to take care of myself, try to catch my breath from those thoughts that had been tormenting me for days now. So I locked myself in the bathroom, turning on the shower and letting the warm jet of water envelop me. The water glided over my skin like an illusory balm, but there was nothing that could truly wash away the weight of that tension. Each drop seemed to repeat a thought, an image, a smile that I shouldn't have remembered. He was on my mind, constant, impossible to chase away. The more I tried to ignore it, the more the desire made its way like a raging river. Suddenly, a noise interrupted the incessant flow of my thoughts. A knock on the door made me jump, my heart racing as if it were looking for an escape route. I stood still for a moment, my breath caught in my throat. "It's me," said a deep, calm voice from the other side of the door. I recognized it instantly. That voice was now rooted in me, like a forbidden melody that I couldn't stop listening to. "Can I come in?" My heart pounded in my chest as my brain desperately searched for an answer. I should have told him no. I should have stopped him, protected that fragile balance that was collapsing under the weight of our silences. I should have closed that door, that road that was leading us towards disaster. But I didn't. I remained silent, unable to oppose something that was now overwhelming me. That silence was my biggest mistake. I heard him turn the knob, the door opened slowly, and his figure appeared through the steam that enveloped the room. Our eyes met, and in that moment I knew there was no turning back. The world outside seemed to dissolve, leaving us alone in a timeless limbo, where every rational thought shattered under the weight of desire. And as he advanced, I stood still, knowing that I was about to cross a line that I could never erase. The steam from the shower had spread everywhere, enveloping the room in a dense, suspended fog, as if time itself had stopped. The air was humid, heavy, filled with something indefinable. He approached without saying a word, and I stood still, unable to react. I felt the heat of the water enveloping my skin, but I couldn't tell if it was just that or the tension burning me from the inside. My breath became short, fragmented. "We shouldn't do this," I whispered in a small voice, an almost broken sound, but my words were no stronger than the desire that vibrated between us. He didn't answer, his eyes locked with mine, in a silent challenge that pushed me to lower my defenses. All resistance collapsed in that moment, fragile as glass. What happened between those walls of vapor marked a line that could never be erased again. From that moment on, every time we were together, the silence became more deafening than the words left unspoken, a silence that carried with it the weight of a truth that we tried in vain to ignore. My husband still didn't suspect anything. His unshakable confidence wore me down more than any accusation. Every smile of his, every gesture of affection, pricked my heart like an invisible thorn. Yet it was precisely that blind trust that made every glance, every encounter with my husband's nephew, a fire I couldn't put out. The days passed, one after another, the same in appearance, but different in substance. Every night I found myself thinking about what we had done, about that forbidden contact that continued to haunt me. One evening, while I was sitting in the garden with an open book on my lap, I heard his footsteps approaching. The sun was setting, painting the horizon in shades of gold, but my heart beat faster just sensing its presence. My husband had gone out with friends, leaving us alone again. When he sat next to me, I felt his gaze touching me like an invisible caress. "I need to talk to you," he said, in a low but firm voice. "There's nothing to say," I replied, trying to escape the power of his eyes. But he took my hand, forcing me to look at him. "We can't pretend like nothing happened," she whispered, her voice a mix of strength and vulnerability. "For me, it wasn't a mistake. For me, it's something true." Those words pierced me like a sharp blade. I felt my world waver, guilt and desire intertwined in an inseparable knot. I wanted to scream at him that he was wrong, that we shouldn't allow all this to continue, but the truth was different. For me, too, it wasn't just a mistake. It wasn't just physical attraction, but something deeper and unspeakable. The bond between us had grown like a poisonous plant, rooted in the shadows of our lives. I tried to repress those feelings in the following days, trying to return to my usual existence. But every time I met him, every time our eyes met for too long an instant, I felt that desire flare up again, stronger, more unstoppable. It was like an underground current that dragged us towards an abyss from which we would never be able to rise again. One evening, after dinner, we found ourselves alone in the living room. My husband had retired to his room early, exhausted after a long day at work. The nephew sat next to me, and in the silence of the house I felt that electrical tension return. One gesture, one look was enough, and everything collapsed again. Every barrier, every rational thought was swept away in an instant of pure surrender. That night, while the world slept unaware, we abandoned ourselves to a feeling that went beyond simple desire, as if we were bound by a destiny written in the stars. The next morning I woke up with a lump in my throat, oppressed by a painful awareness. The guilt was a boulder crushing my chest. My husband, unaware, had already left for work, and the silence of the house seemed deafening. In the kitchen, I found my husband's nephew acting as if nothing had happened, but his eyes told a whole other story, a world of unexplored emotions, of unspoken words screaming between us. "We can't continue like this," I said finally, breaking the suffocating silence. He looked up, his dark eyes full of longing and regret. "I know," he replied in a small voice, "but we can't even pretend that we don't feel anything." Those words hit me like a punch. The sincerity of that feeling, so powerful and at the same time so wrong, tore me apart. But I knew I had to make a decision. The marriage to my husband wasn't perfect, but it represented years of shared life, of trust built day after day. I couldn't afford to destroy everything for a feeling that, however intense, had no future. One afternoon I found him in the garden, immersed in his thoughts. I approached with a heavy heart. He looked at me, already aware of what I was about to say. "We can't continue like this," I said, my voice firm but broken with emotion. "I love my husband, and as real as what happened was, I can't live with this secret." There was a long silence. He looked down, his shoulders hunched as if carrying a weight impossible to support. "I understand," he finally murmured, in a small voice. Those words were a silent surrender, a goodbye that didn't need to be spoken. I turned and went back into the house, leaving a piece of me there, in that garden, with him. But I knew it was the only option. That secret would stay with me forever, a sweet and painful memory of a love that could never truly exist. He finally nodded, his mind seeming to be lost in distant thoughts. "I understand," he said with a note of resignation in his voice, like a silk thread tearing. "I don't want to ruin your life. It wasn't my intention to do that." Those words, whispered with the sweetness of an unwanted goodbye, affected me deeply. Every syllable crept into my heart, like rain falling lightly, but inevitably. I knew the situation was complex, as intricate as a web woven by the hands of destiny. Yet I was aware that he did not want to destroy what I had built with my husband. Years of complicity, of certainties and promises whispered under the light of a complicit moon. As painful as it was, the truth became clear to me. The best thing for both of us was to stop, take a step back, let ourselves slip away from that spiral that, with the force of a vortex, had overwhelmed us. In the following days, the atmosphere calmed down. Every gesture, every word became more cautious, measured, as if we were walking on an invisible wire. He made the decision to leave. It was a tacit agreement, a mutual choice to give us space, time, and perhaps even the chance to heal. When the day of his departure arrived, my heart was divided. On the one hand, a sense of relief pervaded me, like a ship that finally finds shelter in a safe port. On the other, a dull pain crept inside me, like the cold wind that creeps through the cracks of closed windows. I watched him as he gathered his things. Each object seemed to hold a piece of our history, a silently whispered memory. And as he closed the suitcase, a lump tightened in my throat. I wondered, with a weight weighing on my chest, what our lives would have been like if we had made different choices. What would we have become? Would we have found another form of happiness? There was one last look between us. Their eyes met, a silent dialogue made of farewells and regrets, full of meanings that no words could have expressed. Then, without saying anything, he turned and left. The sound of his footsteps dissolved into the air, leaving behind a deafening silence. My husband never suspected anything. His trust in me remained intact, solid as a rock, and I, with a mixture of gratitude and torment, made a solemn decision. I would do everything to never betray her again. The lesson I had learned was a hard one, a warning etched into my soul. Temptation, at times, can be as seductive as a forbidden melody, but the consequences of giving into it are devastating, capable of leaving deep cracks where there was previously perfection. As time passed, I began to rebuild myself. The sense of guilt, which had accompanied me like a shadow in the first few days, began to slowly dissolve, like fog in the morning. In its place, a new awareness took shape. I realized that my marriage, despite everything, was stronger than I had ever imagined. I decided to dedicate myself completely to that love, to my husband, to our future together. Every small daily gesture, every smile shared, became a precious piece of that second opportunity I had received. There were moments, fleeting and lonely, when I thought about what had happened, not with regret, but with a sense of melancholic gratitude. That story had been a warning, a reminder of how fragile the balance of relationships can be, and of how fundamental it is to never take the love and trust of those around us for granted. That chapter of my life was now closed, sealed like a letter that I will never read again, but that I will always carry with me, hidden in the deepest recesses of my heart. A bittersweet memory, a secret kept quiet but never forgotten. Yet despite everything, I was determined to look forward. Life slowly returned to normal, like a river resuming its course after a storm. But deep inside, I knew that nothing would really be the same. That storm had left an indelible mark, invisible to the eyes, but palpable to the touch of the soul. Maybe this was how it was supposed to go. A mistake, a lesson, and finally a promise. The promise to never lose what really matters again. If you want to receive new videos of the series, write, "I want the sequel," in the comments. If you like the video, leave a like and subscribe to the channel to receive a preview of the next publications. Thanks.